So this is the Nephew SDK meeting for January 30th, 2024. Okay. Before we get started, does anyone have anything that they want to talk about? I think I should add an agenda document at some point. Okay, well, I'm not doing it. Okay, if not, let's start it. Hello? 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 Hello?
Hey,
Yeah,
we hear you.
we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, my browser crashed. So
Is it Chrome?
it's Chrome. I mean, the thing I can say good thing about this is that it came back very quickly, but it crashed. Let's get started. Okay. So 2 weeks ago, we had, I think there's certain areas that we gained some consensus. That's why the document's updated to basically reflect those. The two major areas that we have consensus are the execution engine, if you will, of Helm onboarding is going to be bundled together in the vendor package. So this is now your choice if you want to use Flux versus Vim's, whatever Vim's thing is, or versus operator SDKs, Helm operators. That's up to you. The second thing we had consensus on is we'll be using a repo to store the Helm charts, at least for now. So we have to factor that into our workflow. Being that, we are well. I mean, hopefully we ship this week on R2. So we pretty much into the R3 development cycle. So I would advocate that let's get started on the SDK front. So the idea is we'll ship something in R3. We'll release something in R3. The first version of SDK would hopefully be part of R3 released. It is a separate tool. It's not like bundled together with Nephew release, but it's something you can download, execute in your host, and it's supporting probably just one version of the CLD for now. And so that's last time Kieran, who's not here, we're asking, do we have a user story into the doc? So I sketch out something very simplistic. As an NF vendors or an SI, you want to use that tool set to basically onboard a network functions. And then as it is more one or more network functions, the most common things that we imagine, and that's the whole reason why we're doing this for so long, the Helm discussion for so long, is because we it seems like the most common things that a network function vendors would be providing is the Helm charts. So we want to onboard using Helm charts. And the idea is the Helm charts are hopefully not going to be modified. And if there is any, it has to be very minimally modified, and hopefully we can test all vendors' Helm charts. There's no vendors providing their Helm charts yet at this point. But then we'll use a sample to kind of examine framework-wise whether or not we can keep it such that we don't need any major changes. And then after that, as part of the test case, maybe we want to upgrade the Helm charts and see what that workflow looks like on different scenarios. One where you may have to change the values.yaml versus one where you don't. And then not a stretch goal. There's a goal that I would like to see on L3, which is I would like to, as a SI or as a vendor, I would also like to fully immerse into the Nephew experience. So other than just creating an operator, you should be part of the hydration pipeline also. And if we're using FreeFiGC, which is not an if, it's definitely going to be FreeFiGC. One of the things that we haven't done, but that may require some logic that kicks into the hydration pipeline, is the fact that the PLMN, MCCN are input once, but it's used by AMF and SMF. So we should be able to add from the tools. But Vim mentioned last time that this is already supported, which is great. But then as a tool, we should allow vendor to express this is how I want to do it. I'll check against whether or not a PLM has been inputted yet. If not, then user has to input it. If not, if it's already there, then I would just take the one that's already there from the other packages. So that would be a great thing to add on, and it actually adds some features onto FreeFiGC. So once that works, we can kind of deprecate the manual, mainly written by me onto Danny's and Ronak FreeFiGC operators, and probably upgrade to this newer version that is generated by the SDK. So moving forward, if we have any changes in the CLD, in our Nephew CLDs, we have additional supported features that we want to propagate into our sample operators. This would be continuously done through the SDK. So that's the idea. Okay.
Stephen,
go ahead.
Sorry that I raised my hand. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So let's assume.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about yet a different flow somehow.
Uh-huh.
So let's assume that we have something like Flux in the workload cluster, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That is able to install Helm releases, right?
Okay. Yeah.
What I saw in the Helm file is you can basically instruct it to install it through a CRD, right?
Yeah. So I think Thiakra mentioned that for Flux, for example, your values.yaml could be represented by a config map.
Correct. So in other words,
you can use a CLD to tell them I have an upgraded Helm chart. Yeah. So that the management side. Yeah. So if you have a Helm chart changed, you have a different versions. You meaning users still need to load it into the Git repo, but then you can load a CL that tells the system Flux that a new Helm chart is there. Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that Helm seems to be an Achilles heel somehow to a certain extent, right? But we have to support it, right? So what I was thinking is this, right? Is that if we build our SDK that would support Helm, but by what it would do is it would spit out a CRD to say, I need this Helm chart to be installed with these values. Please, you delegate it to whatever operator that is in the system. He takes care of it, and then our controller does all the rest. Would it work?
So you operator, meaning that they're human operators or
no. So let's say we have an SDK to generate a piece of blob, right? So let's say I don't for me, it's a black box at the moment, but
Yeah.
we need Helm capabilities within that, right? So there's two ways. Either you parse the Helm chart and yourself, right? Or you use something that is a well-established mechanism to install Helm into the system, like Flux, right?
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is that if in our SDK somehow we have the ability to basically call upon that well-established Helm installer, would that flow work?
So
in other words,
couple things.
what I was
So
thinking
couple
is,
things I'm thinking about, right? So what do you mean? So you want the Helm? You basically want Helm to be resolved. So you want to do a Helm template out of that and create just manifest? Because
well, let's say I generate, so I get NF deployment, right, from the management cluster, thing, right? And let's say here is the Helm release that you need, right? So there's a bunch of metadata I get, right?
Yes.
So I start parsing it, right? So I generate the values of the YAML file, and I know which related Helm chart I need. So based on the parsing that I do, I call upon the Helm CRD that these Helm, well-established Helm installers consume, and you call upon them with the additional, let's say, metadata that you consumed, and as a result, you basically
So that's the idea. So the SDK, which is a tool, would bundle all this static information.
But for me, I would say don't bundle it. So what I'm trying to say is that decouple it. So there is a well-established thing in the cluster that we don't have to worry about. The only thing that we need from the SDK is the CRD. We need to know which CRD that we would have to call upon.
We would need to someone needs to bring up the Flux and the Helm.
Yes, correct, but that's not the problem of the SDK. In my view, that's the problem of
no, it's not. It's not. So we just want to. The SDK wants to make it easier. So you as a vendor would come in and say that I'm choosing this, and then therefore I would like to put that into the bundle, such that if we loaded this operator package, it would guarantee that at least the Helm piece, the Helm related pieces are also coming up. If it's already up,
correct.
Yeah, but if it's
not
if you
look to the if you look to the NF2 infra, we take care of that, right? It will be installed.
Okay,
if you basically say that there is a requirement, so you don't have to.
No. So at the very least, so I'm okay with that. So at the very least, the package would have to have some way of telling you I have a dependencies on this Flux version and this Helm controller version,
or Argo or config sync or whatever,
or some other
flavor that we use,
and then NF2 infra. I would like someone else to take care of that for sure. So if you have that, it's just a metadata field that they have to specify during the SDK process. That would be great. So they don't have to like give the full deployment specifications as part of the.
Correct. So that's why I'm trying to decouple a little bit, because then we are trying to bundle too many things at the same time, and then anyhow you need to figure out whether you need it or not somehow. So okay, but Tal has his hand raised, so let him.
Yeah, go ahead, Tal.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with Wim on this. I don't think it needs to be in scope for the SDK. Although, Stephen, your idea of maybe a metadata somewhere that can say, I need this. Well, we can discuss that separately. I feel like as part of the onboarding process, it's not required. I do want to mention there is one more thing we need to do for onboarding other than just getting the Helm chart in. We need a space for some specialization logic, potentially, right? Because if we have the values.yaml for the Helm chart, we need a way to create those values, right? So as part of the SDK, by the way, that could be optional. It could be that some Helm charts...
they don't. Yeah, they don't have to, but it could be all manual. But then if they really
honestly,
want
with
to,
network functions, it would pretty much always need to be done, I think, because they always have some configuration value that's specific for the deployment. But I would say that what we can do as part of the SDK is, it could create a skeleton, no op specializer, right? With all the bundling for it, makefile and all that to create it. Then there's some work needed to be done that we can't do automatically, but at least we have a space where you can put that business logic, right? The specialization logic.
So writing the code is writing the code. So writing the code, I would imagine most of them would be using Vim's conditional function SDK.
See, you can do it without that. I'm refactoring
or not.
that, by the way.
Yeah,
but then you don't have to write code.
As far as the SDK tools go, So there is you can write your own cap functions. That's fine. You can write your own controllers and load it in. That's fine. You can use Vim's the SDK, the functional SDKs, and use it. But then at the end, the SDK tools for Nephew is basically just responsible for generating a cap file so that your cap functions would be pointed to.
Right.
So yeah,
I mean, you can do a lot of different things on your own. You don't have to use the SDK even, but I think the SDK can give.
In fact, we have not. So the SDK is basically a new workflow that we introduced. We've gone through two vendors, if you will, without using the SDK. So.
Right. My point is that as part of the user story, I do think that needs to be mentioned, like creating.
Oh yeah. So this is what I'm saying, that you take advantage of the automation features. So I guess I have to explicitly spell out that this is part of the specializers, because
or some specialization. It doesn't have to be the same as we have, right? So it's
okay. Yeah, I can add that in. Thanks.
I actually have another kind of wish list, and maybe not everybody will agree with it for the user story, but the big problem with Helm is it does nothing for day 2. I wonder if the SDK, when you onboard Helm, it can also give you a kind of skeleton for a day 2 controller. You don't have to use it, like an operator, right? That would sit next. It could be as part of the Helm jar. It could be separately, right? We can discuss how that works. But for people who onboard Helm, to give them the opportunity, at least, to add kind of day 2 reconciliation code, at least a skeleton to build it, right? They don't have to use it, but I would love it to be part of the SDK.
No. So yes, for day 2 stuff is obviously what we kind of differentiate ourselves. In fact, the Helm onboarding makes it very clear distinctions between there is a deployment phase where we can automate some stuff and it looks cool, but then the operator's main role really is moving forward. Now I give you an intent as part of the whatever the. Actually, yeah, the noise actually came from you, so it's probably some sort of echo from your side, Tal. What do I want to say? So the operators would be monitoring for that, and then fitting the intent. How exactly that day 2 actually got shaped out, whether or not we can even create a sample out of this, is an interesting thing. I think last time when I first presented it this year, I said maybe if observability is ready, then there's some observability libraries that could be linked. But I think we have to first define the day 2. We have to define what the day 2 operation are as a specific use case, and then creating either libraries, or if we can, as Tal said, if we can create a sample base reconcilers that are already taking care of some day 2 operations, and with some stub libraries that they have to implement. Meaning any vendors have to implement. That would be awesome. But then at this point, I don't think we have a really well-defined day 2 yet.
Yeah,
the history tells us that let's not be too ambitious for release. We can talk about that as user story for sure. But then for R3, I don't know if it's realistic at this point.
So if we can, because we're working on the user story together, and I'd prefer the user story to be complete, even if we can't do anything in R3. It might be in R4. Maybe you can add something like TBD day 2 operator for Helm.
Okay. Cool.
I apologize for my noise issues. I'm going to try to see what I can fix here.
It's gone, Dal. No.
Yeah, it is. It's gone. It's gone. Yeah. So it's just that one time you spoke. If for some reason your mic or something doesn't like you. Okay. The diagram I didn't change. Probably isn't. It's relevant, but probably the text isn't really correct anymore. But we talked about that earlier, so let's skip that. And then go to R3 scope. The high-level scope is we are now onboarding, assuming that we never onboarded 3.5GC. So the end game is we onboard 3.5GC, AMF, SMF, UPF to Nephew while the Helm charts. Actually, the rest of them too. It's actually even slightly easier because it's basically just taking as is for the rest of the other 7 or 8 network functions in addition to those 3. So we can onboard everything, but then especially pay attention to AMF, SMF, UPF, because they're the one who has corresponding operators or controllers that would be generated as the part of the SDK or developed as part of the SDK validation effort, if you will. So I think last time a gentleman from Red Hat came by and then talked about CLI extensions using Operator SDK. We obviously need to include the QBuilder's Operator SDK into our Nephew SDK. We're not reinventing a operator, the SDK for an operator as part of this effort. That would be silly. So So I know Operator SDK itself bundles QBuilder, so obviously that's possible. That you can write a CLI wrappers with the QBuilder control runtimes and even the workload into your tools. I think Operator SDK may make it easier for us to extend the CLI, so we have to examine that. And then as part of this, because the SDK is released at hopefully the same time as the Nephew core release, it would be released by saying that we are supporting Nephew CLD NF deployment, V1 Alpha 1, V1 Alpha 2, and so on. So there's a way probably to specify, well, not probably, that's definitely a way that we have to specify which version of the NF deployment you want as a vendor, and then we'll generate that base reconcilers, and then we'll create a bunch of libraries that would stubs that you would have to implement by parsing the parameter graphs and things like this that would go inside. And so those are kickoff things that would happen. At the same time, at this point, we are at least generating 2 packages. Obviously, your workload, you can have a lot of workload packages if you want to. That's not dictated by us. This is basically the vendor's own decisions to see how many packages they want. But let's say for now, for FreeFiGC, for each network function, there's only 1 workload package. And then there's an operator package. And so the interesting thing is, for FreeFiGC today, we create 1 operators for every single, for the 3 main network functions that we care about. If we do an SDK to generate an operator, and then we do it by saying that, oh, let's do AMF, let's do one for SMF, let's do one for UPF. That would basically be 3 different operators. So that's part of the workflow that may change moving forward. And just a heads up on this. So instead of having 1 major operators, they may actually be creating controllers in the back end where the front reconciler would be reconciling the NF deployment and use the provider field to send it to one of the controllers, and then the SDK would generate a controller alongside with that reconciler, which would be the same for all 3 of them, and therefore you only launch once. But then we'll see how that goes. That's implementation details moving forward. And as we talked about earlier, we would rely on NF to infra, so that's some pressure on them to help us spin up the dependencies. So in this case, let's say we use Flux and the Helm controller from Flux. So we'll expect that when we deploy the operator package, these things, the NF to infra would be spinning up the Flux and pieces into the workload cluster first. Oh, go ahead, Tal.
Yeah, so again, to Wim's point, I do think like the workload cluster issues are don't have to be in scope for this, right? In terms of testing that the onboarding work, yeah, we need a complete, deployment.
Yeah, so for release, we have to have a story. So the SDK now has the dependencies on NF to infra pieces.
Right.
And then the thing we talked about 2 weeks ago is, I think there was a discussion consensus is a strong word, but then no one disagreed. That I think Huron proposed that, which is, if we, instead of like picking a winner, the NF vendor may just bundle that inside their package, which I thought was elegant. But then if it's already handled by NF2 infra, that would be even more elegant. So so that's great. So I agree with that. We do have to somehow annotate that or set that in metadata so that NF2 infra would be able to realize that this flux thing is needed. So it would load it into workload cluster before the operator package is deployed. But then, we have to agree on what that metadata looks like. It's probably some sort of CL that we load inside the package. But then we have to agree on that. And I'm perfectly fine because, as Wim said, NF2 infra needs to take care of that anyway. So that's great. And it is part of the Nephew framework.
It is part of our very specific workflow, but I imagine that in the real world, in a lot of cases, the clusters are already set up. But I wanted to raise actually a different point here.
Okay.
We didn't talk about this in depth, but already right now we have Python-based operators in Nephew, right? At some point, I do want us to go over that in depth, right? And kind of do a presentation, hopefully from the people who work with the KOPF library in Python and evaluate it. I mean, the results are great. I mean, it ended up working really well. But I wonder, this is not for R3 scope necessarily, but again, thinking about the scope of the SDK generally, do we want to support Python path 2? That's something I would really want to see.
I think particularly when you're addressing like the SI crowd, this is definitely a very strong use case. A strong a requirement is a strong word, but at least there's definitely some desire. I would guess that a more DevOps friendly language would be something we want to support.
So you put operator SDK in parentheses there. Maybe I would
for R3
Okay, I feel like this is too early to like define what will be an R3 or R4, etc. I think if we get the basics right, we can decide what we can do by R3 and what we'll have to wait, in my opinion.
I mean, we're in execution cycle, so I just wanted to get a scope of R3. But anyway, yeah, go ahead, man. Sorry.
I agree with Tal on that because we are basically defining the implementation, which for me is not right. You avoid the creativity. If someone comes up with something that doesn't require that.
Okay. So yeah,
I think the use case should be clear what we want to achieve, right? And then how they do it. Because in my view, it's even, if you ask me, the SDK should be language agnostic completely.
I mean, that would be ideal, but we'll probably need specific support for certain libraries just to help people along. If we leave it completely open.
Well, okay, but it depends how you do it. But I think there is ways to do this without people writing it the way they want.
Right. Actually, if you look at the, I think the Helm part of the operator SDK, the way the actual operator SDK works is you have these adapters. So you can run the operator SDK with a specific adapter, and then it will generate a different kind of skeleton, right? So that's how Helm works for the operator SDK. If you want to use the operator SDK to wrap a Helm chart in an operator, right? We've decided we're not going that path, but that's how it works. They have all these adapters. So we can have an adapter for KOPF, an adapter for operator SDK, and possibly other adapters in the future for Java or whoever wants to contribute something, right?
Yeah, the operator generating part of the core that we're going to leverage should be multiple. Should not be just one type for sure. But then I'm basically more like realizing an R3. That's like a very well-known choice, if you will, or at least even that is actually Kubernetes versus operator SDK. So it's just more like choices that we know exist that we can go after. But yeah, we can eliminate that. That is fine. Okay, so yeah, whoever takes on that piece have a freedom to investigate which tools they want to use. I would imagine for R3, we would at least want to have a Golang base support on the SDK. And then if we have a bunch of handling functions, it would be great. So make it easier for guys to just have to implement library steps. And the execution engine, we talked about that. We have to agree on a metadata that will be encoded, and then we'll let NF2Infra take care of that. So we can update this. And then we want to see what kind of things we can specialize out of this. I could think of one, which is the PLMN stuff that I talked about. And then I think the slides related info is that part of OAI already? I actually haven't been tracking. So if it's a part of the 3GPP extension, which is still vendor specific, I think right now. We can also include it. If not, then maybe we'll do that as part of the exercise also. Only SMF needs it. And I think we have an image path somewhere that can be overridden, but I don't think any of us are really using it. And then really stretch goal, it probably won't happen, which is the topology info. So that would be something we can specialize, and then we'll see if we can implement and try to use the SDK to add that as part of this. So the CLI tools, explore use of something, explore use of various tools. Extend the CLIs of the other tools, and then change it to Nephew SDK, obviously. And then with Nephew SDK specific operations. And so we need the SDK because obviously the idea when you're a vendor, you still need to implement the vendor extension CLDs, and then you may or may not create controllers off of those, and that would require the operator's SDK. And then the reconciliations of the Nephew CLD, the NF deployment specifically, will generate a base reconcilers. We talked about that earlier. Obviously, it's a dummy that you can modify however way you want. I do feel that there are many things that we've done that assumes the operator owns the deployment objects and things that may not be true because now it may be owned by Helm. Those are interesting things that we when we implement it, we explore and see whether we can make it more common across different vendors in terms of implementations or libraries and things. We have to have packagings. I know there's a CapGen from Vim. Cap obviously themselves has some sort of packaging tools. We can explore both. And then at the very least, it generates two packages. One is operator, which is at least the NF deployment CLD. So that specifies versions that you actually loaded. If it's already loaded on NF, on the workload cluster, that's great. Otherwise, that's the one that this operators would be relying on. And then the NF operators deployment, at least, or other things that you need on your NF operators, your system volume, whatever that you would need. And then, as we said, this Helm engine would now be part of. There's still a metadata that needs to specified metadata CL that needs to be there. But then NF2Infra would be the one responsible for the actual deployment of the execution engine. And then the vendor extension CLDs, which is going to be part of that package. And then obviously this is no longer relevant. Oh, actually, no, it is. But I'm also guessing the NFT infra will be loading these. So for example, for Flux, there are a set of CLDs that would come in from the Helm operators, the Helm versions, the Helm repository, and all that stuff. So those CLDs needs to be loaded, but I'm guessing NFT infra will take care of that too.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it will be a package which has a dependency upon. We'll get it. Yeah.
And then the workload cluster things are something that you bundle today for FreeFlyGC, so that doesn't really change much. The SDK just helps you grab your vendor extension CLs and the NF deployment CLDs, CLs all into the package. And the note that on the other hand is the thing that I never actually mentioned, but it's on the diagram, which is your vendor extension CL at the very minimum, we sort of expect that to generate the values.yaml. In the combination of NF deployment and your vendor extension CLs should be enough to generate all the things you needed for values.yaml at the very least. It could be additional stuff too, by the way, but it's just at the very least, it has to have enough to generate that for deployment. So we rely on the operators to take those input, generate the values.yamls, and store them into the Helm repository. So that at this point, this is still TBD. Go ahead.
Yeah, one question. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. So my question is on the vendor extension CRDs. They should come in via the config meta CR, right?
Yeah, they should. Yes. Oh, yeah. So we should generate that for them.
Yeah, correct. So because that was the vehicle. Otherwise, we have to for every vendor have a specific implementation and stuff like that. With this, we make it completely meta, right? So
right. So how is it generated today in terms of the param? Param ref is created on the management cluster, right? So when this is deployed.
Wait. So in the package, right? When you create a package, you the specific configurations are basically embedded in the config CR as a meta CR. So I think that we should use that mechanism because that allows us to
so you don't have to load that into the management cluster, but you extract that out of the package. I see. You extract it.
Yeah. What you get in the workload cluster is a config CR, right? And that contains potentially various additional CRs with various information.
So back when we did it together in L1, that was much more ad hoc. So I guess right now it's more official.
Yeah.
So do we have to specify a metadata field to tell you that to annotate something to tell you this resource is for config, this also for parameter ref?
Yeah. So you basically when you create a package, there is an annotation.
That's great. So we can do that on the SDK. So make it easier for people that when they do a vendor extension, we'll annotate it for them.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, when you generate a package, you can do that. Yeah, and then that avoids us to install all the CRDs. And whether you basically bundle multiple CRs in one config CRD or whether you do a one by one doesn't really matter. That's implementation.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's part of the SDK will do that, and then your code will be extracting it from the package and then if they have specialization, specialize it, and then link that into the NF deployment. This is all done by specialization anyway. Well, I mean, this is more like a things that I was thinking about. So if you already created your CLDs definitions and make manifest make generate your vendor CLD YAMLs, then the tools will be smart enough to go into that directories and just pick it up. And then as Wim said, we'll annotate it. So that will be included as a config ref. There could be some other things. So whoever picked up the packaging part would be welcome to explore other features that make life easier for vendors on the packaging side. The hydration pipeline additions. So we would have to look for opportunities to how to add them. And then this is more use case driven in my opinion. So if we find out the use case, for now we'll see what kind of things the SDK can help, to make your life easier. I mean, writing a cat function is still writing a cat function. We're not making that easier. I think Vim is trying to make that easier already on his SDK, so we can leverage that, and so you can write it for just basically specifying the resources that you generate, that you watched, and you own. Then that would be one way to building it, and then link to the corresponding libraries. You have to push it on Docker, and then that image path you have to specify. The one thing they can do is in the SDK specify that, and then we'll add it on a cat file. The other thing is, so this is probably implemented directly into the function. So for a particular case, like, oh, I'm SMF, I would like to go in to look for AMF package where not the PLMN is already there. So is that something that you statically tell the system this is the case, or is the intelligence baked into the cat function? So for Vim today, how is that done on OAI?
Which one? Sorry.
Yeah. For an example, as an example, I mean, it's a good thing to do anyway as this exercise. So today, when you still want to input PLMN only once, right? For OAI.
Yeah.
And then for AMF, SMF, and even the UPF.
Only once. Only once.
And then do they have to statically specify something so that you know that they're cross-referencing the same PLMN input?
So at the moment it was static because we were waiting for the binding stuff that John was doing. Okay, so we didn't get that.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we have a way forward there. But for R3, right? But with R2, it is not there.
Okay.
So basically, yeah, today we added the PLMN in every package statically for the time being. But the idea is to replace that with the binding logic, and then you get it automatically. So you basically so what you would have to do is create a binding reference, and then it would inject it automatically.
And then the binding refs is something in a cat file that you have to add, or is it
in the package? Just in the package.
The package. Okay. So this is still a packaging part that we have to do. Okay. And there is a cat function. So you of course only write a function to basically extract from the right place, right? Or controller even.
Yeah, but if you use the config CR, I mean, the idea was always, that's why we had this meta CR, right? Because we were not going to be in the business of PLMNs and 3GPP parameters and stuff like that. So we said, okay, if you have some metadata that could be coming either from another package or would be added to the cluster somewhere. So the binding point would do that automatically. So you will basically specify where the data is located.
I see.
And then how to get it is a function.
That's nice. So this is more like this is like one of those injector or mutator type stuff. So we can
correct. So
we can
in other words,
SDK can help add that in actually. Yeah. So okay, we can do that too into the cat file.
Yeah, when you generate the package, those reference points you could do in the SDK, correct? Yeah. So you could basically. But what I wanted to avoid us to do is that we have to be specific on all these parameters and stuff like that. So you can have vendor specific CRs, or you can have 3GP. We don't mind. You just need to know which pieces you want to puzzle together. And
no. I mean, it's opaque. So obviously the SDK doesn't understand it here. You just have to specify the reference. All right. So that sounds good. So that's something we can add. And then at the end, obviously, to validate all this thing is working, we have to do it with FreeFileGC, as we talked about. So you have to define the CLD that fits into the values.yaml. Shouldn't be too hard because obviously we base the operators and the CLD, the NF deployment of at least the earlier version of NF deployment CLDs, based actually on the FreeFileGC Helm charts. And then we can write libraries for the processing and the default, leveraging the default base reconcilers, and then see how we can extend. And as we talk about PLMN, something we want to play around with. And then at the end, one of the end game to satisfy that user story is to ensure that we can do various different Helm chart upgrades, changes, and things. And then we can document for changes like this. You have to rebuild. For changes like this, you can basically just update your upgrade your update a parameters of your package, so that we'll be looking at the new Helm charts. Things like this. So that would be, so if we get to that point, then I think that is a good thing to release for R3. Cool. Any other questions? All right. So for folks that are interested, go ahead and sign up. Either talk to me on Slack or directly add it into the document would be fine. And then we can dig deeper into each area and then see how they linked. And then we can start building it.
Yeah, I wonder, should we?
Mhm.
I have a feeling there's a lot of POCs we need to do. Maybe we can create a repo in Nephio experimental to just with a place to push various POCs related to this. What do you think? So we can all kind of use each other's code and play around with it freely, rather than do PRs, of course, to the main project.
Yeah. I mean, at some point it should be. Well, at some point it has to go into SDK, but then we can play around with things first. If that's
I feel like we need a lot of cooking to do before we do an actual PR to the SDK.
Okay. Yeah, but we can. So I created that repo that early because I was hoping that we'll file issues on that, so we'll be able to easily retrieve the SDK related issues. They're not meant for code yet at the time when I created it, the repo. So we can start creating issues too. And then for folks that are interested, they can pick up the issues.
Let's talk about that for a second, because we've kind of put all our issues in the Nephio main Nephio project.
So I did that, and then Bala came back and told me that he wants everything on Nephio.
Yeah,
that's why I didn't file any issues on Nephio.
Yeah, but we can put a label specifically for this, so we can filter it out or filter it specifically.
Yeah. So that's another thing that I can do too. I can file some issues, stories at least, or even epics. And then if folks are interested, let me know. I'll just pick it up, and that would be great. I'll send it on Slack once I have those, and then just get going, because we're kind of into the R3 development cycle already, technically, I would say. So if we want to make progress, I guess it's time to get started.
Yeah, maybe it's worth mentioning, this is a high priority for Google. So we'll definitely, Stephen and I will be trying to move this forward.
Building this, yeah. Cool. So I'll file some preliminary issues. Anyone who's interested can file issues too, for things that they think it should be part of the SDK, and we'll go from there. So hopefully some folks would be willing to contribute. We appreciate any contributors. So cool. Anything else from anybody? And then please comment on the doc too if you really have some other things that you want to see going for R3. So I'll at least file issues based on that. And obviously you can file issues too. So cool. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen, for putting this together.
Okay. Thank you. That's the meeting. 7 minutes early. So thanks.